My most anticipated game of the year is finally here. If you're wondering why I'm so excited,
Monkey.
now that it's finally installed, I can start playing. I'll be honest, the game looks a little different than what I was expecting, but I'll keep an open mind. Wait, okay, I'm already seeing inaccuracies. Wukong never used a fucking gun. Ah yes, Wukong's famous building technique. I can't believe they added this in. Ah yes, Wukong's famous car driving. They really went all out with this. This game sucks! Okay, so it occurred to me that I was just playing the wrong game. I was able to fix things up, and it should be working now. Eat the food. Eat the damn food. Okay. Oh shit. It's a baby Wukong. I get to be a dad in this game? Don't worry, kids. I'm not gonna leave like my dad. Okay. I don't know why I experienced so many problems trying to start the game, but I fixed it, and words can't describe just how excited I am to play this. I heard it's not really a Souls-like, which is great because after Shadow of the Erdtree, I want to play something on the easier side. I gotta say, this is the best video game out there if you want to play as a monkey. As for me, I don't have a lot of experience when it comes to monkeys in video games. Piece of shit! Come here! Anyways, after finally beating Black Myth Wukong and pouring over 100 hours into this game, is the hype real? Yeah, I don't know about you, but this is my game of the year. I haven't had this much fun playing a video game in a long time. And I mean genuine fun. The type of video game where you'll be outside touching grass, but you're just itching to go back home and keep playing. And I'm still not bored. I'm on New Game Plus Plus. Yeah, I've beaten the game twice, and I'm gonna be beating the game at least one more time. Normally when I beat a single player game, I'm done playing and move on to other things. But not this one. The replay value along with the gameplay loop makes this an enjoyable experience throughout the 40 or so hours it'll take you to complete the story, and the story along with the world is just so immersive. I'll be honest, I had no knowledge on Journey to the West, which is what the game is based on, so there's a lot of references and names that just went over my head. It's like going to see a Marvel movie and not understanding a callback, or it's referencing a scene that was only a minute long from a movie where you were still most likely swimming in your dad's balls. Or when Star Wars fans start foaming at the mouth when Glub Glub, Master of the Suck, makes a cameo for some Star Wars comic that they sell at the $1 clearance bin at your local Walmart. This game made me want to look into some of the lore regarding Journey to the West, and while it clears up some questions I had, I still got more research to do. I had the game set to English, and it still felt like half the stuff they were telling me was a foreign language that made my brain short circuit. This game was clearly made for fans of that story, and you can tell a lot of love and passion went into making the game. Black Myth Wukong is already breaking records, selling over 10 million copies, and with a Steam player count of an all-time high of 2 million players. For a single player game, that's just unheard of. I wonder how Dustborn is doing, but why is it doing so well? Is the game actually good? Did it actually live up to the hype? Let's sit back, relax, and talk about Black Myth Wukong. Enough with the monkey business. You get it? Because I was talking about... Okay, let's talk about the story first. Now again, I'm not too familiar with the character Wukong and the story he's from. I just know that the character of Goku was inspired by him, and Son Wukong in Japanese that literally means Goku. I'm an American. The only ape that's popular around here was this local gorilla from a zoo. I'm sure some of you have heard of him. Here's the story of Black Myth Wukong as best as I can describe it. The game has what I think is the best introduction to any video game I've ever played. It doesn't waste your time because the moment you press start, it literally just starts, and your first enemy is... I don't even know what all this is. Who did bro piss off? Wukong rides a cloud towards him, and just look at the sheer scale of what's going on. He lands and is facing not only 5 big dudes, also known as the 5 Heavenly Kings, but an entire army from the Celestial Court, which is basically heaven. And he speaks.
My master. Safe. The scriptures. Sound.
I'm not gonna lie to you, that was not the voice I was expecting to come out of that mouth. It grew on me though. Wukong is supposed to be mischievous, so I think it suits him. And then another character comes along.
Stay back! Stupid dog!
You made me look bad!
His name is Erlong, I think that's how you say it, and this is now our first actual boss. But it's a tutorial boss, and it's one of those fights we're supposed to lose, kind of like the first boss of Sekiro. So we find him, and again, this is the best opening to any video game I've played. Like, what is even happening? Even I can see the inspiration here for Goku and Vegeta. Well, Wukong transforms into a bird, and yes, he's got 72 transformations, and suddenly this crown appears on his head, which takes him out of the transformation and allows Erlong to deal the final blow, killing Wukong. I put killing in quotations because the dude can't even die. He erased himself from the Book of Death. He's just him. So 500 years pass, and supposedly Wukong's remains are inside this stone, but to bring him back, we gotta collect 6 relics that Wukong left behind right before he died, and that's where we come in. We don't play as Wukong, we play as another monkey called the Destined One, and throughout 6 chapters, we travel across different lands to get a hold of these relics, and that's basically the main plot of the game. As for all the other references and names the game throws at you, I was kinda lost. It's almost like how From Software writes their stories, where you learn about the world from character interactions and environmental storytelling, or watching fatty videos. Black Myth Wukong makes it easier since this is not a Souls-like. It's definitely inspired by those games, but it's not a one-for-one like Lies of P. Throughout your journey, you'll encounter a bunch of different enemies and characters. When you discover them, they get added into your journal, and you can read up on all the lore and backstories of each of them. If you have a terminal case of brain rot and you can't read anything without having some Subway Surfers in the background, you're cooked because there's so much reading, which again shows just how much the developers cared about the game. I've read half of the journal entries, and they're so interesting, giving new light not just on the main characters, but even the minor ones who just meet on the beaten path. Still though, I didn't know what some of these characters were yapping about. They like to speak in such profound quotes. Even the trophies in the game don't directly tell you how to get them. It's all just a bunch of riddles. If you know nothing about Journey to the West like me, you're probably not going to understand everything, but I was still just so immersed into this world and the lore. It makes me want to look into Chinese mythology to truly appreciate this even more. I can see a fan of Journey to the West really appreciating how the developers did these characters justice and introducing them to a new audience. To add on to the story of Black Myth Wukong, the 6 relics we have to collect can be found on the final boss of each area. And let me tell you, they ain't no joke. More on that later. The more relics we collect and the more moves we learn throughout the game, the more we start to resemble Wukong, mainly because these relics are actually a part of him. We even run into someone who was a good friend of Wukong back in the day, Zhu Baji, I have no idea if I said that right, who actually did join Wukong on his journey to the West, and he really carries the story since your character doesn't speak at all, like me when I'm around women. This is now spoiler territory. If you want to skip this part, go right ahead. So some time passes and we collect 5 of the 6 relics. We go back to the mountain with the stone that has Wukong inside, and we go in, and it turns out we're in his memories. Turns out the last relic is Wukong's mind, and we gotta fight his shell. From what I gathered, and I can be wrong, once we get to the 3rd phase, he sucks the 5 relics out of us, and he is now possession of all relics, which means he develops Wukong's personality. Like, this fight became personal. He'll throw you all over the place, knock your ass on the floor, toss your staff at you telling you to get your lazy ass up. He's just sitting there chilling and slowly gets up when he sees you, and then I tried to take a sip from my healing gourd, and the asshole froze me, took a sip from my gourd and tossed it back to me, gaining a bunch of health. The utter disrespect. Once we beat him, we get the 5 relics back, and now it's time for the 6th and final one, Wukong's mind. I got the true ending, which that crown Wukong had in the beginning is no longer a part of us. So what even is that crown? This crown was given to Wukong by his master to ensure Wukong doesn't defy the celestial court anymore, which is why in the beginning we saw that when the crown appeared, Wukong lost the fight. But did he lose on purpose? Turns out this was all part of Wukong's plan. He knew that he wouldn't have a chance against the celestial court because of the crown, so he allowed himself to get defeated so that one day a destined one, us, would collect all the relics, and once he got the 6th relic, which is Wukong's mind, Wukong would then come back, but this time in a new body, which is our body, which means Wukong is back without the crown, since his soul transferred to a new body. We were basically playing as his vessel the entire time. That's what I got from the ending. The other ending, which is the bad ending, is the crown gets put on us again, repeating the cycle. And that's the story for Black Myth Wukong. Despite being slightly confused at times, I found it so interesting and immersive. Even though it can be vague like From Software games, the journal entries make things a little bit easier to understand, which makes the world you're playing in just feel much more alive. I thought the ending was pretty good, especially since it ends with this beautiful animation. I mean, this is art. I forgot to mention, after completing each chapter, you get to see an animation delving into the backstory of certain areas and characters. These animations have different art styles too. I mean, this game really is full of passion. It's clear to see. Speaking of visuals, how are they? Are they any good? Yeah! I swear sometimes this game is better than real life. Black Myth Wukong is easily the best looking game I've played in a long time. From the character models looking almost lifelike to environments looking like I actually stepped out of the dark confines of my room and touched grass. The game even knows how good it looks because there's these meditation spots you can go to that give you an extra level up, and it just showcases the absolute beauty of the world around you. It's almost like it's flexing on how good it actually looks. You'll be going through some lush forests, dry desert landscapes, huge snowy peaks, peaceful autumn forests. There really is a lot of variety when it comes to the visuals and areas you'll be exploring. Even the architecture of the game is insane. The buildings look so photorealistic, and that's because they are. Game Science, the development team behind Black Myth Wukong, went on site to scan many of the buildings and textures, statues, which adds to the immersion. I mean, look at the drip you can wear in this game. This has to be some of the coolest armor you can wear in any single player game. They went even further here because you can upgrade certain armor sets, and instead of it only just increasing the stats, it changes the appearance too. I couldn't even decide on what I wanted to wear half the time, and a lot of the times I kept getting my ass beat because I was too busy staring at my surroundings, taking in all the sights, especially during those meditation spots. I did every single one of them. Okay, now let's talk about the gameplay. The gameplay of Black Myth Wukong is honestly just dumb fun. It doesn't do much that I'd say is innovative that's gonna change the world and make Jesus come come back, or better yet, make my dad come back, but I still haven't gotten bored of it. The game has a bunch of skill trees to choose from with different categories. There's more trees here than the amount of trees Mr. Beast has planted. You have the usual skills that improve your stats and resistances. That's nothing new, like being disappointed by new Black Ops 6 zombies. But there's some that adds to gameplay to ensure that it doesn't get too repetitive. You can spin your staff to deflect incoming projectiles. You can get more focus, which are like these little circles down here which allow you to do the heavy attacks. So the more focus you have, the stronger your heavy attack. There's perfect dodges, which grants a brief moment of invincibility and leaves an after image of your character throwing off the enemy. You can even upgrade it to do slight damage. There's seeing through an enemy's attack, which is this game's version of a parry, where you gotta use a heavy attack just when the enemy is about to hit you, so you can go even faster with your next combo. There's a category called Foundation that upgrades the efficiency of all those abilities I just mentioned. Then there's the staff stances, which unlock, well, different stances for your staff. These stances don't change the light attack combo of your character. That stays the same no matter which stance you use. It only affects the heavy attacks. There's 3 stances: Smash, Pillar, and Thrust. Smash, well, just Hulk smashes the staff on the ground. Pillar is cool because it extends your staff and you can support yourself on top of it, leading to slamming it on your enemy. And then Thrust stance is me when I see your mom. It just extends super far, which is handy if you're trying to keep your distance from someone. You can even upgrade these stances to add even more moves that you can perform in the middle of your light attack combo. For Pillar stance, you can unlock a move that lets you spin around on your staff. You can then unlock another heavy attack that lets you back up and then smack your enemy. Then for the Thrust stance, you can perform a tactical retreat followed by this thrusting attack. And then another move immediately after where you just repeatedly poke the enemy, and it's just hilarious to pull off. So yeah, each stance may not add a new entire moveset for your light attacks, but the addition of heavy attacks make the combat never get stale, at least for me. I'm on Wukong, and even after pulling off that same light attack combo more times than the rejections I've gotten from women, it still never gets old going crazy with that staff and hearing my dude make monkey noises. But that's just combat with the staff. There's other skill trees as well. What we just talked about were the ability skill tree. Now we're going to be talking about the spell skill tree. Throughout your journey, characters will give you spells which can appear in your hotkey at the bottom right. These spells have their own categories as well. In the mysticism category, we got Immobilize, Ring of Fire, and Spellbinder. Immobilize lets you freeze an enemy so you can land a few hits on them. Certain bosses can counter this though, so it's not 100% foolproof. It's still my most used spell though, just because it comes in handy so many times if you need to get some distance away from a boss or just want some free damage. Ring of Fire creates this circle around you, kind of like what SpongeBob and Patrick did to protect themselves from the sea bear. If you stay in the circle, you gain focus points faster, stamina is increased, you slowly recover health, and you get more damage reduction. There's an upgrade where the effect still works even if you're outside the circle. It doesn't work in water though, so keep that in mind. Then there's Spellbinder. I did not use this at all. It increases your attacks but blocks you from casting any other spells. Maybe there's some use to this, and if someone wants to teach me, let me know in the comments, but I really did not use this. The next category of spells is Alteration, which has Cloud Step and Rock Solid. Cloud Step is what I use for basically the entire game. It leaves an after image of your character and turns you invisible. Enemy will then attack your decoy. This was a huge lifesaver throughout the game because it allowed me to make a quick retreat so I can heal up, or if I wasn't sure on how to dodge an attack, I could use it to make sure I didn't die. If you attack the enemy while invisible, you do this kick that staggers them, granting you a window to deal a couple of hits. It also lets you get around the map faster, so it's good for that too. Then there's Rock Solid, and I've been using this for my New Game Plus run, and it's pretty satisfying when you manage to pull it off. For a brief moment, you turn into stone, and if you time it just when the enemy is about to hit you, it deflects and staggers them, almost like a parry. The other category for spells is Strand, and this is the most fun in my opinion. There's the Pluck of Many spell, which you can summon clones of yourself that help you in a fight, and it's just hilarious seeing a bunch of monkeys absolutely ganging up on someone. This never got old, and you can really turn the tide of a fight if you feel like you're about to fumble. There's even an upgrade where if you perform a heavy attack, your clones will join you in unison. Life-Saving Strand is a secret spell that you can unlock in New Game Plus, and it lets you resurrect if you die during a fight. I haven't used it yet because I don't die, but maybe in my next playthrough. Then there's Transformations. Throughout the game, you'll collect spirits after defeating certain enemies. They usually have blue flames on them, and they're tougher to defeat than the normal ones. Once you absorb their spirit, you can transform into them for a short amount of time. In the lore, Wukong has 72 transformations, but here we get 54. That's still a lot though. You can choose a transformation to cater to a particular build you're going for. I did a lightning build, so I used the Rat Governor, aka Master Splinter, which shoots lightning. Not to mention the spells that let you transform for a lot longer than your usual spirit summons. In order to use spells, it costs mana, which is the blue bar here. Transformations on the other hand use might, and the more you attack, the lower the might goes. It lowers even faster if you use heavy attacks. There's a lot of these transformations too. I mainly use this two-headed rat that has flaming daggers, shoots fire, and then there's the other one with a lightning spear. His name is Yellow Long. All these different abilities just makes the gameplay loop never get stale and gives you a lot of options on how you want to play the game in a fun way. It even encourages multiple playthroughs to unlock different weapons and spells that are only available in New Game Plus. I didn't talk about weapons. Well, there's not much to say. It's mostly just staffs and like one spear. The spear moveset is actually different than the staff because instead of you getting this thrusting move, it can summon a shit ton of swords and just throw them at the enemy. Moveset wise, they're the same, but they have unique effects. Since I was going for a lightning build, I used this staff that shoots lightning after your final attack. Later in the game, I got a staff that shoots a lightning dragon, like something straight up Sasuke would do. There's a lot of staffs to choose from, so better hoard up on materials because you have to craft most of the weapons. Not only is the drip impeccable here, but the armor pieces, just like the weapons, have unique effects too that enhance certain attacks or abilities, giving you a lot to experiment with. All of this just makes you want to keep playing to see what you can come up with. There's also these charms called Curios that give you a small increase in a certain ability or stat to give you that slight edge. There's a lot of them too, and I spent quite a bit of time analyzing each one trying to figure out which combination would suit my needs. There's also those 6 relics I mentioned earlier that you need to collect. They kind of act like perks for your character. Each relic has 3 effects, but you can only choose 1 for your first playthrough. If you want to have 2 at a time, you gotta go through the game again in New Game Plus. If you want all 3, then you gotta play New Game Plus Plus, which again makes that replay value go higher. Now this game is not Souls-like, but it is Souls inspired. You have the shrines that are like the bonfires, your healing gourd, which is your Estus flask, and then the hardest boss in the game being the fucking camera. The gourds are cool though because it's a creative spin on the Estus flask. So you have the actual drink itself, and there's different ones to choose from. There's the basic one that increases a lot of your health when you take a sip, one that increases your movement speed, another that increases damage on your next attack, and one can replenish some of your mana, just to name some. Not only that, but you can add even more benefits to your gourd by putting on soaks. Soaks add even more advantages when you take a sip. There's so many soaks, I won't go over all of them, but to name a couple, there's one that increases the duration of the immobilize spell, and another that increases critical hit chance. Not to mention some Curios charms can actually add more buffs to your drink. All these combinations of drinks, soaks, and Curios charms is going to make you stay in the menu for a long time, but in a good way, not like Starfield. You can even change the gourd that you want in the game. There's a bunch of gourds to choose from, and each one has different perks or abilities that you can use, on top of the soaks. The gourd in this game, compared to Dark Souls, makes the game way easier. But Black Myth Wukong is a lot more forgiving. When you die, you don't even lose any level progression. You don't lose will either, which is the in-game currency. By the end of the game, you can have like over 1 million will. There's really no punishment except for the run back of shame. It's more comparable to Jedi Fallen Order or God of War. It doesn't mean the game is a cakewalk. It's more like having Steve Aoki throwing a cake at your fucking face. At the shrines, there's a store where you can buy medicines, ingredients, and materials. You can even make medicines too, and to make the medicine, you either have to gather the ingredients throughout the world or harvest them in these baskets next to this fox, which looks like Todd from The Fox and the Hound if he took fentanyl. But yeah, the gameplay is solid and it's just simply fun and easy. Leveling up in Black Myth Wukong is fast too, not a grind at all. I'd be playing doing my thing only to find out I have a bunch of points I can use to level up, which is awesome. I think the max level is like over 300, which means if you wanted, you can max out every skill tree. All in all, this is a dumb fun action adventure game. But what about the level design? I'm gonna keep the level design section short like me. This is a very linear story based game. This is not an open world, which isn't a problem. Are the levels themselves impressive? Honestly, they're pretty good. It's nothing insane and I wasn't blown away like the recent Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. The visuals got me hooked, but sometimes I realize there's a lot of massive empty space, which means occasionally a lot of running, but nothing to see. But that was rare, so it wasn't enough for me to get annoyed. What did annoy me were those invisible walls. More on that later. I'm getting ahead of myself, but in Black Myth Wukong, there's a lot of bosses. I think the most bosses I've ever fought in a video game. You could be stuck on a boss for like an hour, finally beat him, and then like 30 seconds later find another one which just awakens the wrath of your ancestors. Once you realize you're gonna be stuck on another boss for yet another hour. Luckily, the gameplay in between bosses is nice. Lots of secrets and collectibles to find that you'd miss if you just keep doing any monkey business. You could easily miss a meditation spot and not get that free level up if you just rush some of these places, or even maybe miss a potential favorite spirit if you don't look carefully. The enemies you fight along the way are cool too. Like seriously, the enemy variety in this game is crazy. Just look at the journal of all the different enemies you'll be encountering. It's neat too because there was a lot of times I see an enemy and I'd be like, damn, he's sick. And then turns out I can actually transform into him. They don't mess around either, like this off-brand Kratos or these rats with these sickles. But yeah, the levels do branch off to different paths, but for the most part the game is linear and clearly wants you going a specific direction sometimes. And sometimes it just makes it way too clear. I didn't even mention the secret areas. Each chapter has a secret area, and in order to get a certain one, you have to complete a quest. Some areas are bigger than others. For example, in the second chapter you talk to Queso, and basically you and him enter this giant door that sends you 500 years back in time, and you gotta help the Yellow Wind Sage King defeat this giant beetle and it just turns into a visually insane boss fight and awards you with a very important item that I'll mention later. Like seriously, I was just exploring. I did not intend to find a whole secret area with an awesome boss fight straight out of Monster Hunter. There's more secret areas in the other chapters. I think my favorite has to be chapter 4, where you go in this autumn forest and it's just beautiful, and you fight a boss that's nightmare fuel, turning the sky red and it's straight up raining blood. It's actually recommended you find all the secret areas in the game to unlock the true ending. There's even a whole secret quest line involving this family of dragons. After completing the quest, you get this sick staff that summons a lightning dragon, not to mention the secret hub area of the game, which is in this painted world. You see all the vendors, and you can upgrade your armor here too from this tiger. Even he's a boss fight, but if you manage to beat him, you get his transformation, so that's cool. You can even give any seeds you find to this dude, and he plants them. After some time, the crops are ready to harvest, and you can use the ingredients to make the medicine. There's a lot to do. At least the hub area is relaxing. So yeah, I'd say the level design is nice. Not the most crazy thing, but it's enough to keep you hooked on exploring and seeing what's ahead. Now, let's get into the main appeal of the game. The bosses. There's more bosses in this game than there are fans of Concord. I mentioned earlier that Black Myth Wukong has the most bosses in any game I've played, and I wasn't exaggerating. Like seriously, you could just be walking around enjoying a scenery and get jumped by some random boss. Now you would think with so many bosses there would be an issue of quality over quantity, but there were more winners than stinkers here. But believe me, the ones that did stink smelled worse than Asmongold's room. More on that later. I can't help but feel like the placement of each boss is on purpose, because anytime I start to feel even a little bit confident, some boss will just humble me, especially the final boss of each chapter. This is the first game in a while where I was actually kind of nervous to go up against the final boss. When I first started the game, I was doing pretty good and only died a handful of times. Even the final boss of chapter 1 wasn't too bad. I got him only on my 3rd try. But then chapter 2, I still get nightmares. This is where I faced my first real roadblock of the game. I even beat the Tiger Vanguard everyone wouldn't stop crying about on my 2nd try. But this dude had me looking up and accepting my impending demise way too many times. I would be doing good at first, but once he summoned that sandstorm and tossed me around like a ragdoll, I started fumbling. He then goes outside the storm, so you can't even attack him, and you just gotta dodge his attacks until he comes back. That's where I was struggling. I spent an hour on this guy until I got frustrated and went off to do something else. Remember earlier I mentioned talking to Queso and going to this secret area to fight the giant beetle? Well, after beating it, you get the wind chime, which allows you to make the Yellow Wind Sage's sandstorm disappear. I literally got him on my 1st try after using it. This is why it's important to explore. I'm not going to talk about every boss because we'd be here for hours, but I'll mention 2 more highlights of mine. Remember how I mentioned this quest line involving hunting down dragons? Aside from the hardest one being the camera, there was one that made me want to go to the highest cliff I could find and scream asking God what I did to deserve this, and that was Yellow Long. I can't look at any other dragon the same ever again. It doesn't matter who it is. I was stuck on this dude for an hour and a half. This was the first boss that had me stressing, concocting different types of medicines just to be chugging them all down. My character became an alcoholic because of this. But instead of slowly getting the upper hand in the fight like Rock Lee did when he drank his gourd, I got smacked harder than how my uncle used to smack me. Even though it was super challenging, I had a great time just coming up with different strategies on what would work best against him. And once I finally did get him, I don't know if it was because I spent hours playing as a monkey at this point and the monkey neurons started activating in my brain, but I got so excited even I started screeching like a chimpanzee. Apparently, there's people saying that the game is too easy. Look, this game ain't no Shadow of the Erdtree difficult, but it's not Weenie Hood Jr.'s. A lot of these bosses can give Elden Ring bosses a run for their money. I didn't think it could get harder than this. I felt a rush of confidence, thinking that I might have beaten the hardest boss in the entire game. Until I met this guy. Erlong was the most difficult boss I had to fight in Black Myth Wukong. I was dying to this man for over 3 hours. I'm not kidding. It was like 3 in the morning as well, so I couldn't yell to let out my anger. I just had to sit there standing, violently convulsing, genuinely losing my sanity. I think at one point I almost started crying. The only other boss that I can think of that gave me this much trouble was Radon in Shadow of the Erdtree. This man has like 4 or 5 phases and can easily counter all your spells since he's used to fighting Wukong, so he knows all your tricks. I tried everything, man. I tried anything I could think of. Eventually, I realized the plantain fan you get from chapter 5 works great against him since it staggers him repeatedly. This gave me a chance to just start wailing on him. And once I broke his posture, which yeah, you see that little bar above his health? You can't actually damage him until that bar is depleted. And to do that, you just gotta keep hitting him. Once I got that bar all the way down, I'd immobilize him once he staggered and would not stop hitting. You really have to be aggressive for this fight. It was working and I did my best to keep repeating this with all his phases, but I still just kept getting... My only other strategy was to get good, but that was nearly impossible. This man had me like this at one point. Then, look how close I was to actually beating him. This made me go, no! No! So I had to put that rage to the side and lock in, and after over 3 hours, I finally got him. And would you believe it? It still wasn't over. I know I spoiled a lot for Black Myth Wukong already, but I really don't want to show this next part just yet. What followed was perhaps the absolute coolest sequence of events in any video game I've ever played, and that's a bold statement. but man, is it very much true. Despite what this fight put me through, this was the best fight in the entire game for me, and one of the best fights I've ever had in any video game period. So yeah, the bosses for the most part in Black Myth Wukong nail it. Especially the final boss of the entire game. I know I was just glazing the other 2 bosses, but this one is just insane, man. It's like 5 phases, and then you fight the shell of Sun Wukong himself, and he is such a cocky bastard, which is, you know, accurate, but damn, dude, I felt disrespected this entire fight. It got personal, like I wanted to see this guy get his ass beat. There's some of the coolest looking bosses too, like seriously, the art direction for this game is one of the best I've seen in a long time. I got no idea how you even come up with half this shit. Okay, I'll talk about one more thing briefly, and mention my negatives for the game, and conclude everything with my final thoughts of Black Myth Wukong. They were absolutely cooking with the soundtrack.
华府六八百里，曾是怪为富饶地。一朝蜀汉平空气，午夜朝气渺壤气。
And they knew it too because you can listen to all the songs from the main menu, and this looks like something straight out of Spotify. The music is obviously Chinese oriented, you're not going to be finding immortal deities to trap music. Ubisoft, they even got the same theme song from the Wukong show from the 80s here, for the true fans. Sometimes I'd be distracted listening to the music during a fight, and it would throw me off. Other times, the music would calm me down after suffering through a boss. I mean, not much to say, they probably almost burned down their office cooking up these bangers, and I listened to most of it with no skips. There's not too many negatives, but there's some rough patches in this for sure. We're not talking launch day Cyberpunk 2077, but there is some jank here. For starters, let's talk about the first wall players will encounter in this game. Or should I say, invisible walls. Throughout my playthrough, I kept falling for them. Now, invisible walls aren't necessarily an issue. I mean, this is a linear action-adventure game. It's just they're hidden so poorly that they look like it's actual locations you can go to, and it can easily confuse you. I've tried going down cliffs just to meet an invisible wall. Oh, but sometimes you can fall down. Yeah, sometimes. This creates inconsistency throughout the entire game because you'll catch yourself testing certain paths to see if it's an invisible wall or not. I know it's not an open world, but dude, at least let me go off the beaten path a little. If not, make it look like I can't. Next are some of the bosses. Again, most of them are great, but oh man, some of them make me want to explode like this 2-headed rat. I'm talking about the big ass bosses that, unlike them, have microscopic hitboxes. This boss called Wise Voice is a wise ass. This is the asshole that cuts my health in half in the area during chapter 3, and his hitbox is his ankle. Anywhere else hardly does anything. His attacks are annoying too. Also, some of the dragon bosses just made me dizzy with the camera. And look at this! What am I even looking at? I see a health bar, but I don't see a boss. What I do see is the game trying to give me a seizure. Also, the performance. I'm playing Black Myth Wukong on PS5, and while for the most part the frame rate can be consistent, when it's not, you really see it. Look at this fight again. Not only am I dealing with the camera, I'm dealing with the stop motion animation frame rate. I'm being double teamed by 2 issues with the game at this point. And also, this game needs some sort of map. There's some areas in this game like chapter 4 in the Web Hollow where a lot of the areas just look so identical that you can easily get lost. And with no map, there were times where I'd just be running around in circles going back to places I had already been. If they didn't want to include a map for the game to be more immersive, they could have at least done something similar to what Ghost of Tsushima did, where the wind would actually blow in the direction you gotta go to. That was at least helpful. This, I was just lost a lot of the times, okay? Those are the negatives I encountered throughout my time with Black Myth Wukong. It's not a lot. Still, for a small team in their first AAA release, I'd say they passed. They had a smaller budget than Concord, and they made a way better game, but like a wise man once said,
that was an improvement, but it's not hard to improve on garbage.
Well, that's about all I gotta say about Black Myth Wukong. It's not a deep game, but it really is just so much fun to play, and that's what I want in my video games. Your game could look pretty, have an amazing story, be the peak of human evolution, but if it's not fun, I don't want it. It's like Reggie says,
if it's not fun, why bother?
Despite the flaws I mentioned, Black Myth Wukong has enough engaging content to keep you hooked, especially for multiple playthroughs. It's got an immersive world with interesting lore, satisfying combat, easy progression, and a banger soundtrack among others. This is my game of the year in terms of single player games, and since the game was so successful, there's not going to be DLC, and I couldn't be happier. I'm buying that day one, no questions asked. That's all my brain's got for now. What do you guys think? Do you like Black Myth Wukong or not really? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and yeah, thanks for watching.